Like the lunatic that I am, I stayed up all night this weekend to watch the first round of the 2015-2016 season of Formula E. The race took place in China, which meant that the first practice started at 1:15 in the morning here in England, but I stayed up to watch it all the way through because Formula E only happens in one day. Well, a Formula E round happens in one day. It starts at 1:15 and the race doesn't happen till 9 o'clock. But I stayed awake all the way through it because I knew it was going to be something special, and because Formula E races always are, and I was not disappointed. This Saturday we saw domination from Sebastian Buemi. Looking back at testing, EDAMs were doing really well, and it wasn't really unexpected that they were doing so well during the day. The first ones to have problems at the race actually didn't even make it to the race. Truly had problems in customs, which meant they couldn't get to the track on time, which meant they couldn't participate in the race. It really sucks for them because they had such a poor pre-season testing. I don't think they actually made it out onto the track at all. So to not be able to get to their first race is really damaging for them. Hopefully we'll see them next time. The first practice session of the day was topped by Sebastian Buemi and the second by last year's winner Lucas di Grassi. Going into the first race of the season, Formula E was stepping into new territory with their new Super Pole qualifying. The first half, as I have explained before, the first half of the qualifying happens like it did last season, with the 4 qualifying groups going out one group at a time and the drivers setting 2 fast laps, which would then be used to set their order. Once everybody had gone out and done their laps, and all 18 drivers, because truly weren't there, had set their laps, the top 5 would then have to go out and set another lap. They go out one at a time, and the order of the top 5 is based on the second session of laps that they do, and from everyone from P6 downwards is based on the normal qualifying. Those that got into the Super Pole part of qualifying were Lucas di Grassi, Nick Heidfeld, Nico Prost, Jean-Eric Vergne and Sebastian Buemi. Buemi came out on top of that, and joining him on the front row of the grid was Nico Prost. Buemi was 0.284 seconds faster than Prost. Top 5 went Buemi, Prost, Heidfeld, di Grassi and Vergne. Vergne had a huge lock-up at the start of his lap, which meant his lap was really uncompetitive. My verdict on the Super Pole, I really like it. I think we'll have to see it more to see whether it could be a disadvantage to some drivers as it was for Vergne, but I think it's good. It gives a level playing field for the top, and so the person who's on pole won't be on pole because they got the best conditions during qualifying. So I think it will come into play. I think it will change the results the most for races that are held with varying conditions during qualifying, such as the second London ePrix of last season. Nelson Piquet, last year's champion, was not having the best of times. He had a bit of a crash during the first practice at the end of the pit lane, and then qualified dead last during the qualifying. He is not having the best of starts and didn't have the best of races. The race was dotted with full course yellows, which were also new to this season. First came on the 3rd lap when Simona Di Silvestro from Andretti found herself in the wall. The start of the race up until that point had been bad for Prost. Prost lost out on the start of the race to Nick Heidfeld and to Lucas di Grassi. Lucas di Grassi ended up in 2nd after the start of the race by the time the full course yellows came into play. On the restart after the full course yellows, Prost took Heidfeld again. Prost was upping and downing a lot. He lost out a lot of places during the race and then made them back up on restarts. Up until the full course yellows, Jean-Eric Vergne and Loic Duval had been having quite a battle for 6th place, and that continued after the full course yellow. The pit stop started on lap 13. Formula E has this quite unique pit stop in that the driver who gets out the car gets in another one because the battery won't last long enough for the entire race. So there's only one pit stop a race unless you happen to get a penalty for something like speeding in the pit lane, but normally there's only one visit to the pits during a race. People including Buemi, Prost, Heidfeld and Grassi pitted on lap 13. Then lap 14, Villeneuve and Da Costa crashed into one another, which brought out the full course yellows again and allowed those who had waited an extra lap to pit under the full course yellows and come out in a much better position than they would have done if the full course yellows hadn't been in place. PK and the Dragon Racing drivers were three of the drivers who benefited from that a lot. Once again, during the pit stops, Prost had lost out to Heidfeld, but on the restart after the full course yellow, he once again made up that pace, and he was going after De Grassi in P2 when he clipped the wall, and that led to some damage to his rear wing. He carried on, there didn't seem to be much of a problem, but he was shown the meatball flag because it could fall off and hit somebody in the head, and that's really dangerous. But he carried on, he didn't think that there was any problem, but eventually came into the pits quite angrily, shook the back of his car to prove that there was nothing wrong, but safety, and he was out of the race. PK's race went from bad to worse. He did get the advantage after the pit stops and he was running in P10 when he decided to stop on track, which was kind of odd. Not great for your first race after you win the championship, really. After Prost pitted and was out of the race, that promoted Nick Heidfeld back up into P3, which put him into position to get Mahindra Racing's first podium of Formula E. He was getting pressure from the Dragon Racing cars behind him, particularly Loic Duval, who quite wanted that third place actually. He managed to hold them off until the end of the race and finished in P3, getting Mahindra's first podium. Ahead of him was Lucas Grassi in P2 and Sebastian Buemi in P1. Sebastian Buemi set fastest lap after fastest lap throughout the race and he ended up with the fastest lap, so he got points for pole position, points for fastest lap and maximum points for winning the race. You can't really have a much better day than he did. It was an exciting race. It was definitely worth staying up all night to watch. I'm very glad I did. I'd put Buemi as my driver of the race because he could not have done more that weekend. It was perfect. It was a perfect start to what I imagine will be his championship campaign after missing out on the championship by only 1 point last season. The person who I felt did the worst would be PK. And after such an amazing season last year and after winning the championship, you really expect him to be doing better than how he did. He didn't even finish the race. So he's my flop of the race, Buemi's my top of the race. Fan boost is already open for next race. As you may or may not have noticed, I'm a tiny bit obsessed with the fan boost. So if you happen to be voting, let me know who you're voting for and why you're voting for them, because I'm obsessed with it and interested. What you thought of the race? Always good for discussion. Tweet me, comment, and I'll see you again soon.